Golf Nuts. Welcome to the next episode. We are talking about power leverage, who actually controls professional golf right now. In the last few weeks, the sport quietly crossed a line. Brooks Koepka is out of LIV. Bryson is negotiating publicly. Rory is inviting Brooks to TGL, potentially. TGL's reshaping their player influence, and the PGA Tour is rewriting the meaning of reinstatement and who can come back to the tour. So let's get into it.
Before we do that, just as a reminder, we are running a giveaway for this Rapsodo MLM personal launch monitor. Our first 2 subscribers on YouTube and first 200 followers on Instagram. We need 200 subscribers, 200 followers. 1 follow and 1 subscribe gets you 2 entries.
So like, comment, subscribe, invite your friends in, and this giveaway will go faster.
We're going to start with some facts. LIV CEO statement came out. Brooks Koepka and LIV Golf have amicably and mutually agreed to part ways. Brooks is prioritizing the needs of his family and staying closer to home, which could be, perceived in a couple of different ways. Koepka's rep framed it a little bit differently. Family has always guided Brooks's decisions. He remains passionate about the game and will keep fans updated on what's next. So officially, this is mutual, family-driven, and not framed as a golf disagreement. This will affect his contract. I'm sure that he's already figured out what his next plans are and that those just haven't been made public quite yet, due to all the parties at play and the interests for LIV, PGA, and what that means for other golfers on every tour. There's a lot.
$1 million too, guys. But at the end of the day, Brooks and his wife did have a miscarriage 16 months ago. That's going to take an effect here. But I think Brooks was tired of playing second fiddle to Bryson on LIV. And coming out of this, if we know that it takes a year lockup period before he can join back the PGA Tour, right?
The last event he played in was middle of last year, so I think it's August of 26.
August, and he's eligible to be able to redeem his PGA Tour card. I think that Brooks right now, TGL has already asked him if he can come and play with them. Roy had that statement that he put out the other day. Brooks has got to be very selective right now. I think that's the key to his image. And I don't think that this has anything to do with family time. I think that right now he wants to be able to, he's already fallen off of making the Ryder Cup team. He already said that he worked his way off of that team. So now moving forward, he needs to be selective on bringing himself back to the United States, playing on various tours.
Look, to Jenna, that's Brooks's wife, to her credit, she's been very open about her situation and what's happened in the past. And I'm sure that makes a lot of women out there feel like they're not alone. But Koepka's wife, Jenna, publicly shared that they did suffer a miscarriage at 16 weeks just a few months ago. And they also have a young son now. So, there's definitely some validity to, the family statement. PGA Tour eligibility framing is also something to consider. Under current PGA Tour policy, players must wait a full year after their final LIV event and reapply, potentially facing disciplinary review, which has extended now to Pat Perez, who was, he was in the booth, and that's it. But they're taking it from the last time he was on air for LIV, which, it's a different way to read those rule sets, I guess.
I think and I am very sensitive to the family matters, but to put that to the side, if we're just thinking about the state of golf right now, I think about a couple of things. You have TGL, whose ratings have not been great for the first 2 episodes of this year, first 2 iterations of it. The opener had about 645,000 viewers, with the peak of 730, and then week 2 was just about 355,000. It's about 2/3 of a drop from last year when Tiger debuted, and that was a little over 1 million viewers. So to kind of deconstruct everything that's going on right now, right? You've got TGL that's in a ratings crisis. You've got the PGA that is maybe sensing a little bit of the foot on the throat when it comes to LIV. Never mind resources. That's a different issue.
I'll disagree with that one.
But feeling emboldened, no less, Whether or not you can speculate as to what's actually going on in the front office, but feeling emboldened. You have Bryson, who is in negotiations with LIV, unknown future there, but Brooks, deciding to leave. So then how do we kill multiple birds with one stone? Look, Pat Perez is not going to be just automatically granted carte blanche his PGA Tour card back. Brooks Koepka has won 5 majors, guys. And so you can bring back a 5-time major winner, somebody who, in comparison to, say, a Scotty Scheffler or a Xander, is a much more colorful character and can kind of play that bad boy role. You get him involved. Again, what did we talk about on the show previously when it comes to Bryson and potentially joining TGL? It's a way to start moving things back to the mothership. It brings in a potential rating boost in an absence of Tiger, and it gets Brooks back on track to play in major championships in 2027.
And Rory's on the record. We've all seen it by now, probably. He said, we would love to have Brooks join a TGL team. Don't know what that would, look like. He is a founder of that league. He also has said, to take a quote on your take, they've made their money. They've paid their consequence. If bringing guys back makes the tour stronger, I'm okay with it. And look, there are a lot of things happening behind the scenes. We can look at this as just guys talking, or we can look at this as business moves using the press and what they do say to manipulate, an outcome. And I think what we're seeing here is exactly that.
You also have LIV now going to 72 holes this next season.
LIV Golf's move to 72 holes is definitely something they're trying to push so that they can get those OWGR points. However, it is putting them in a bit of a predicament. From a negotiation standpoint, their original contracts with players were for 54 holes. Now, every single player on that tour is starting to look towards their negotiations, bringing that point up as it is seemingly a contract violation. Taking issue with this are also Paul Casey and Louis Oosthuizen, who joined Bryson, calling out and questioning the league's move to 72 holes. Now, what's more important, getting OWGR points to retain players or being financially solvent? Because at the end of the day, renegotiating every player's contract when they're shelling out as much money as they are can get very costly. And even though they have extremely deep pockets, this could be disastrous for them. We talk about free agency later in the podcast, and this is exactly the double-edged sword that free agency brings up.
But they don't have, outside of Bryson, who's their big superstar right now? Rahm's not really, he's pretty quiet over there on LIV. I don't see anybody else who's as colorful.
Superstar. I mean, to be honest, he's made some rounds around YouTube Golf, big time. I would say his career, when you put it back to back with Bryson, is just as good, maybe a hair better in some ways. The difference is that Bryson's just more vocal. He likes the press, he likes YouTube Golf. He's got his own channels. I think that's the difference there. LIV signed an unprecedented deal with Rahm. The terms were different than other players. The amount of money was larger than other players. So LIV clearly sees the value of Rahm, and can they pivot into leveraging him in the sense that Brooks is leaving and Bryson is negotiating now his contract. He's openly said, I am in negotiations, and it depends on how LIV sees the future of their tour. He's not saying anything from a political standpoint that would put him in a negative position during that negotiation, which is smart negotiations in general, but he is using the public as well to help manipulate an outcome.
When does your deal with LIV expire, and have you thought it beyond what your professional life would be after your LIV career?
Yeah, I think there. How do I phrase this? I would say that, yeah, next year is when it ends. We're looking to negotiate end of this year, and I'm very excited. They see the value in me. I see the value in what they can provide. And I believe we'll come to some sort of resolution on that, and super excited for the future. I think that, LIV's not going anywhere. HE has been steadfast in his belief on team golf, and whether everybody believes in it or not, I think it's a viable option. I think it's a viable commercial option. you know, our team has been EBITDA positive for the past 2 years. So we're starting to grow and move in the right direction, just like TGL. You know, TGL has done a great job. They've got some teams that are making some money, and I believe there is a sustainable model out there. How it all works with a game of golf, who knows? But I know my worth. I know what LIV brings to the table. And I'm excited for the future of what golf is going to be.
Right? He's saying, I might not sign with LIV, essentially.
Something none of us have ever discussed before, but Bryson's having such a moment right now in the United States. I wonder what Rahm's perspective is and the optics are in the European market. Is he bigger over there? And do they really push him more in the European market than they do here? Because again, he's pretty silent here, but as big of a contract as he had with LIV, they've got to be pushing him somewhere.
He's one of the most enjoyable guys to talk to. Everyone I've heard, that's met him, that's played with him, and you can just watch the YouTube events, right, where he's hanging out with all of these guys. I mean, he just gets it. It's, I think he could make that jump. I think he doesn't want to do the work that Bryson's doing potentially. I don't know, but on the YouTube side, which is, there's a lot of production behind that.
While
This
we're
is
here,
Rahm.
so we don't get too lost, can one of y'all give our audience here some of the breakdown on what Rahm got for his special contract?
Yeah, why don't you look that up, Patrick? Because while he's building that, another interesting point on LIV is the OWR points have been a discussion for years. This is something that's holding LIV back, and it goes to Rahm's contract and why he negotiated it. Trevor Immelman, who is one of the heads of the OWGR, which is the World Golf Ranking Points, for those that don't know. This matters to every golfer on the planet. They need those to get in and maintain their status on tours, get into events, get into majors. He says, Trevor Immelman says, progress has been made with LIV's application, but no final decisions yet. Meritocracy and structure matter. He is essentially saying it could happen, but look, guys, we're not there yet. Breaking news, though, just today, February 3rd, LIV Golf did receive OWGR points, but there's a kicker. The LIV CEO is not happy. LIV Golf responds after being granted OWGR points, voicing concern that limiting the points to just the top 10 players really misses the mark. Their statement reads, the fundamental principle that performance on the course should matter regardless of where the competition takes place. Limiting points to only the top 10 finishers disproportionately harms players who consistently perform at a high level but finish just outside that threshold. No other competitive tour or league in OWGR history has been subjected to such restriction. The game deserves transparency, the fans deserve credibility, and the players deserve a system that treats them equally. I'm on the fence here, guys. Like, he makes a couple good points, but I don't know. Top 10 receiving OWGR points is a huge step forward for them and probably is what they should live with for quite some time.
Yeah, I mean, and look, I think the OWGR, a little bit of a hot take here, but I think the OWGR and all of this, it's become apparent, probably has and holds more power over the professional game than arguably anyone except maybe Augusta National.
Outside of, the PGA Tour, I would absolutely agree with that 100%.
It is the number one hindrance to LIV. If you could get those points and you're a LIV player, because of the amount of money that's on LIV, more players would have gone over.
That's right. And I don't think that they foresaw that it would be that difficult to get OWGR points and get approved for it. I think they thought they would just kind of walk through that door because of this whole ruse, frankly, of we're doing this to grow the game. Now, the only one that's really bought into that hook, line, and sinker, and he's a dyed-in-the-wool believer, to his credit, is Bryson DeChambeau.
True. And he's doing things to grow the game outside of LIV, which shows that that's what he believes it.
But going back to Brooks has got exemptions on every one of the majors till 2029. So he is, unlike a lot of these other players that have gone over, he has the flexibility to be able to stay and play or have stayed and played. And I think that this leaving, though, we've talked about TGL. I've made my point quite clear on that over the last couple episodes that we have, that I think it will die over the next 5 years. I don't think it exists anymore. LIV is at a very precarious point right now where unless they get these points, I think that it's going to have a short life span too.
I can see that, But on the TGL front, look, Rory is making moves to try to bring Brooks over, which has some leverage points towards the PGA Tour's advantage. You look at Tiger and Tomorrow Sports announcing the WTGL, the women's, essentially the same golf league we're seeing here, but for the women of the game. And, there are moves being made. The product is mature at this point. We're through 3 matches of the season. And while the ratings weren't quite there in prior episodes, we did talk about how the earlier ones are likely not to get the type of ratings we're going to see in midseason and towards the finale. Now we're looking at the 4th one coming out as we're recording this episode in a couple of days. That's supposed to have Tiger coming, but Tiger is actually not going to be playing.
Yeah.
He will be there,
He'll be
but
there.
he's not.
He's got
on
some
the roster.
injuries. Yeah.
I don't know if it's injuries. I'm not sure
he,
what
had
it
a, he
is.
had a surgery about a month ago.
But mark my words, those ratings are going to be higher than any of the first 2 or 3.
Just because he's hanging out.
And he'll hang out in the booth.
But y'all remember when we were in college and you're playing beer pong with your buddies and you got your celebrity shot to come in and one of your friends comes in and shoots that he's maybe the best beer pong player out of the group. Outside of that, I just don't see from a selection. I don't think that Brooks needs TGL. I don't think it helps him here.
So let's pop back to Rahm really quick. We touched on his contract. Let's just highlight a couple of these really big differentiators. People don't understand this stuff. They hear these big topic leading titles that say Rahm got 600 million or some number. Brooks got over 100 million, some unknown number. And regardless of all the reasons why you could move over to LIV, OWGR points anticipated or not, those numbers are the reason why they move. They are vocally saying, I do this for my family, but they're also trying to protect their career. None did it better than Rahm.
So Rahm's contract, which was the largest in LIV's short history, was 450 million pounds. That's about $566 million, with 302 million of that paid up front. That was the guaranteed piece as a quote unquote signing bonus. And then the rest was performance based bonuses, which he very well could have just blown out because he cleaned house last season, if memory serves.
Some big differentiators that I noticed, he was able to negotiate and prepare with his sponsors to retain all his sponsors as he moves over. Pretty crazy, as a lot of these other guys had great sponsorships that they ended up losing, like Dustin Johnson.
PJ lost out with TaylorMade and Adidas.
No equipment or apparel fallout. Endorsements stayed intact. Original players that joined LIV at the beginning, they lost Callaway, KPMG, Workday, RBC, Amex. Tens of millions of dollars per year evaporated, but that was part of their calculus. They knew that was probably going to happen. Phil lost some big ones, and they looked at it and said, well, they're giving me 200 million. They're giving me 120 million or whatever the numbers are. That does factor in, considering you'd have to work pretty hard for a little bit longer period of time on the PGA Tour to accomplish that. But leaving the tour, leaving LIV, has some challenges, and what Rahm built into his contract here is very interesting because it does give him some edges that these other guys didn't negotiate in, except for one that followed him on, which was Tyrell Hatton. I think he has some of these same provisions.
And Rahm also got, similar to the other captains, his own expansion team. So Legion 13, XIII, with an equity stake.
Well, we can't talk about any of this without then coming back to Bryson's going through a contract negotiations right now. And what do you guys think is going to happen with that?
That's an interesting subject because I don't think he's really as much negotiating for money as he is for control and structure of what LIV could be in the future. And business guys behind that tour, they have some challenges. They started with this free agency concept. This was something that Greg Norman jumped up on stage way back when LIV was getting going, and Greg Norman said, we're bringing free agency to golf, right? NFL and all. I mean, this is this big thing that he wanted to happen, but at the same time, that's the thing that might shoot them in the foot.
You talk about Norman. This is in the last couple of days on social media. Someone was popping off on a video about, how Norman either founded or created LIV or something like that. And I just kind of hit him in the comments. I was like, if you think Norman created LIV, look, give him credit. He stepped in as the first CEO and kind of like got it off of the ground from that leadership position. But like, He was nothing more than a vessel. I don't want to say figurehead because he deserves some credit for what he did do, which was go from 0 to 1, however rocky it may have been. But the important stuff, like official world golf rankings, has been lacking, to say the least. And now, to your point, Brian, we're stuck in this era of like, okay, well, yes, we've brought free agency to golf, but that's a very expensive problem to have if you're the PIF.
If LIV is going to survive, then moving forward, that three things have to happen. You have to sign Bryson to a new contract, whatever that is, and he's going to be paid handsomely.
It'll be
And I
show
know it's not
stopping.
about the money.
Sure it
Second,
is.
you got to make sure that there's not a star exodus that's happening out there, and that narrative comes back. Because if you lose a couple more big name guys, like again, LIV is dead. The last is if you can start getting world golf ranking points, then it could be here for a while. But other than that, I think that we're seeing the beginning of the end right now.
Look, Rahm, he has the ownership stake in Legion. We talked about that, but the bonuses aside, Rahm can out earn his own deal, up to $50 million per year in additional upside. Team success bonuses, performance accelerators are all built in there. The original players had flat guarantees, minimal bonuses, capped upsides. So that's a pretty big addition from him. Rahm gets rewarded for winning. Originals got paid for showing up, right?
They had to get him in the door.
Yep. I'm going to fly through a few more here. Flexibility is something that he got. His schedule allows him to control his calendar more than any of the other guys. They had to show up for all 8, right? He actually has the ability to say, "Oh, I've got some family challenges. I'm not going to show up." That's in his contract. It's crazy.
He's probably that flexibility probably extends to the media gaggles too, because some of the early stuff that they did as far as pressers was kind of like, oh wow, man, like Phil Mickelson. I think Phil wanted to be there, but some of those guys, you're looking at them and they're sort of up there nervously on the stands before the pressers before some of the tournaments. You're like, blink twice if you're okay, right?
Now, here's a really big kicker. Rahm pre-negotiated protections for his DP World Tour membership and his Ryder Cup membership, ability to pay fines, which is part of why his number is so big.
Which he's outspokenly said he doesn't want to and does not intend to pay.
Maintains DP World Tour membership, keeps Ryder Cup eligibility, and there's proof. Obviously, he played in the Ryder Cup this last year, right after he announced he was joining LIV. In contrast, Poulter, Westwood, Garcia, they were permanently banned. Sergio.
So is Henrik Stenson.
Yeah, Stenson as well.
And he would have been a captain probably.
So Rahm protected his past. Originals lost their past, essentially. The things that made them who they are was negotiated and taken away from them once they signed that original LIV contract. So all in all, Rahm really has something the rest of that tour doesn't have. And I think what you're going to have is this imbalance with the rest of the players understanding and seeing what's occurring. And they're going, do I even have the ability to renegotiate? Can I get those things in my contract? This free agency thing works. It's a double-edged sword. It can go against the players and make it harder for them to stay on that tour. And if they can't stay on LIV, then they're relegated and they have to go back through, this thing that's occurring right now, which is this open season for LIV. They've got 4 rounds. Look it up. It's interesting. Not sure I really understand or follow it that well. But essentially, you can earn your way onto the tour over the course of 4 rounds. There's some eliminations and so on. But if you're getting relegated or if you don't make the tour, are you gonna go what? You're gonna go play on PGA again? Well, you can't.
You're supposed to sit out for a year, but if I were the PGA Tour right now, I think it would be incredibly powerful. And we already said they've got their foot on the neck of LIV. What if they came out and said,
Exactly.
we will give a
2-month window.
6-month exemption for
for
any player that leaves
Yeah.
LIV to come back to PGA Tour. We'll welcome you back like the prodigal son right now with open arms with no penalty.
If you can qualify, the door's open, but make your decision now.
That would be big, guys.
So look, this is an interesting topic. We're following it. It's ongoing. There's new stuff coming out literally every day right now. In the off season, this is when that free agency is hitting. This is when these contracts are being negotiated before we hit this next season. So watch it over the next coming couple of weeks, months, and maybe we'll even see Brooks joining the TGL. I've seen that part of the problem with TGL ratings is accessibility to even watch it. People are looking at how to watch it. They can't find it. And part of that is due to ESPN being a little bit opaque in terms of how to access it. They have evidently restructured their ESPN Plus, and some people that get ESPN with their Hulu and so on, it doesn't include ESPN2 and certain types of programming, and people just don't know how to access this. Personally, I use DirecTV now, and I just record it so I can catch up on it later. But I've gone through the Reddit comments, I've gone through, the Instagram comments. I mean, if this existed on another platform that was more easily accessible, even just straight to flipping YouTube.
64% drop off in viewerships. I mean, at the end of the day, guys, the accessibility has to be there. But the fact that this is coming on midday, as you just said, in a platform that you have to have a subscription for, when people are cutting the cable left and right, to me, if I'm TGL, you got to serve to the masses to dine with the classes. And it's a problem that they have right now that you need to make this fully accessible on YouTube if you want to get your viewership up. And even earlier to the stats that Patrick alluded to, that wasn't just Nelson ratings. That was Nelson ratings added on with another enhanced metric that's supposed to give an additional booster. So that's 66%, 64% drop off is actually even higher than that.
That's the optimistic scenario.
So look, guys, double check your ESPN subscription or whatever subscription you think you have, because there are evidently different variations. So if you want to tune in and figure this stuff out, once we hit probably 5, 6, 7 episodes in, we'll have enough data to look at. We'll have enough matches to look at. Hopefully some exciting things will have occurred. There's definitely some early stars that are kind of peering out in these first couple episodes.
Chris Goddard
did some cool stuff for sure. There's some putts dropping on Rory's team. It's very interesting thing to follow. So tune in if you want to check out what's going on in the off season on TGL. We've covered the first half of this Odyssey. This is the second half. What happens now that he is allowed back on the tour? There's a lot of details behind this. Let's uncover some of the facts.
Yeah, well, so what you have really here is for those of you business school nerds out there, a real-time case study in leadership that's playing out. Many of you will remember back to the Ryder Cup this past year. Brian Rolapp, new CEO of the PGA Tour, was announced that Jay Monahan was stepping down. Didn't put his best foot forward, arguably, with the whole policing of the fans and some of the abuse that was laid on from the fans towards the European side in the Ryder Cup. Fast forward several months, and here we have I think arguably a tick mark in the win column for Brian Rolapp with a member reinstatement program. So a couple of sound bites from him that kind of lay out the land here. This is a one-time defined window and does not set a precedent. It does. Once the door closes, there is no promise that this path will be available again. Fans want the best players in the world competing against each other more often. What this really is about is the product. Brian Rolapp is a product guy. He came from the NFL, who understands probably better than any major sports league in the world that the fan experience and the viewer experience, the product, if you will, is paramount. So this is about the product. It's not about forgiveness for Brooks Koepka or anybody that left to go on the LIV Tour.
Yeah. Okay. So look, he left the PGA Tour, went to LIV, took the money, won a major. Now he's back. the PGA Tour has created this one-time returning member program. So there is an expiration date on this. At least right now, there's an expiration date. It allows a very small group of LIV players, those that won majors or the Players' Championship since 2022, to apply for reinstatement. The word apply sort of means they might not get it. And maybe that the terms are going to fluctuate from player to player. The key framing here is one time window, limited eligibility, deadline to apply, not available to like 98% of LIV players.
Oh, it's fewer than that. I mean, it effectively only applies to 4 people.
Yeah, guys, this is the biggest haymaker that's happened since the LIV PGA Tour rivalry that's happened. As you just said, 4 players this applies to right now: Cam, Bryson, Koepka, and Rahm. They don't care about anybody else here. And Koepka's still going to keep $85 million of the $100 million that he went over. Supposedly, that's for
Well, we
debate.
know it was north of 100 million, so we don't know exactly how much. We know he left his contract a little early, so he's probably going to be
Did get the
out.
full payout, but inside sources are saying $85 million he's still kept. That's life-changing money right there. Koepka's being brought back like the prodigal son, guys. And PGA Tour is brilliant on what they just did, because as long as right now LIV doesn't get the World Golf rankings, and if they have a star exodus, LIV is dead. LIV is dead. But even out of that list, I would still put a hierarchy that they really don't care about Cam as much as they care about Rahm and Bryson.
And Rahm's locked in.
Rahm's locked in. Some of these people signed contracts later than Brooks. Brooks was coming to the end of his, which was a natural time to get out. He did end it a little early, so there was that about, I think, 20 million that he's probably going to forego. We can fact check that, but Brooks is back. The story really isn't about his return. It's about what this changes.
But it's interesting to juxtapose the family argument, right? When at the beginning of LIV, the outset, you had Dustin Johnson prominently being like, look, I think that it was in Full Swing. The quote was, this is season 1 of Full Swing. The quote was something like, why on earth would you not accept more money to work less? And he was justifying that as, I get to spend more time with my family. And now Brooks is saying, well, after having been globetrotting on LIV, they fly in, they parachute, and they take over these cities and these golf courses for a week, and they parachute right back out from where they came, week in and week out. Whereas Brooks is just saying, I want to be spending more time with my family.
I think we've got a couple of quotes that Josh is going to pull up from Brooks, but there's penalties. This might be the most costly penalty in all of sports, possibly sports history. $5 million charitable contribution that we mentioned, no FedEx Cup bonus money, no signature event exemptions, so he could still play into those events, and no equity participation for 5 years. That's tens of millions of dollars in projected long-term impact. So it's not really a free pass for him to come back. It's definitely costing him something.
Yeah,
And
Koepka said in his interview, he said, I believe in where the tour is headed. I understand there were financial penalties, and I accept those. I don't think he's really sorry, though, guys. I think this is just an understanding of the cost of coming back. And again, if he wants to be relevant in the next couple of years, because he was working his way out of not being relevant in the game of golf, 3 more years on LIV, dropping your world golf rankings, I just don't see where he goes. And he even followed that up and he said, there's definitely going to be guys that will be angry, and I need to rebuild those relationships. Time's only going to tell here.
I think you're already seeing a little bit of that anger, by the way, from YouTube Golf's finest, right? Wesley Bryan has been lighting Instagram on fire, talking about, Brooks is able to just walk back in the front door. Does that mean that I get to come back because I played a 9-hole scramble on YouTube?
yeah, I mean, that's a whole different level of messed up.
I would argue, though, what you just said is really important, and I haven't thought about. If that's Wesley Bryant is arguably more popular today than Brooks Koepka in the game of golf, and more important for the future for the game of golf. And yet the PGA Tour, because as antiquated as they are, they're not going to be able to see the value in reinstating Weston over reinstating Brooks.
Yeah. Something interesting too that I just thought about, and look, he's in the back the back half, if not the back like last 2 holes of his metaphorical 18-hole career. One name that is notably left out that is a major championship in the not too distant past from all of this and eligibility to return. Anyone? Phil Mickelson.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
1 year.
They set the line at 2022 to present. If you've won a major of the players, 2022 going forward, not 2021, not COVID, 2022. So I think it's also like the PGA Tour, while they have moved on substantially from a lot of the deep wounds, the deep pain of the Monahan Norman years with LIV, and while Brian Rolapp has definitely done a lot to move this discussion forward and come back towards some sort of semblance of a table to negotiate or some sort of way to bring things back together and get the talent back focused on the product. They definitely have not forgotten how a lot of all of this started, and it was with Phil Mickelson. So see you, bud.
There's been a lot of players that have started to talk about this. Horschel being one of them that said, look, like, we can be not happy about this, but he said selfishly, I'm okay with it because it's going to help my equity in the tour. And he's talking about the PGA Tour Enterprises program, the tour health, the product, all of that is going to be boosted. But the players that do have a participation in this equity program, they stand to gain when some of these players come. The ratings are going to go up. The income's going to go up. Merchandise sales is going to go up. So let's, for those of you that don't understand that PGA Tour Enterprises and why it matters, after the LIV disruption, the PGA Tour created a for-profit commercial arm called PGA Tour Enterprises, separate from the nonprofit tour, the PGA Tour. It holds commercial media rights designed to bring in outside capital, aligns players with long-term value.
Yeah, and so long-term value, when we think about that from an investor standpoint, you hear the buzzword equity and you think, oh, well, they must own their own piece of PGA Tour Enterprises. Let's make a couple things clear. This isn't stock. It's not ownership. They can't trade it on or trade on it. It is long-term vesting, and the value of it really depends on the success of the PGA Tour overall. I would think if there's a one-to-one analogy to something in the business world, it would kind of be this nebulous brand equity, really. And it's more of a profit share if you want to think about it that way.
But this was also a band-aid, guys, so that they could reward those players that stayed on the PGA Tour versus the ones that went to LIV, and they had to come up with something at the time when LIV was being created, or they were going to lose more of their top 100 players, and it was going to create a real rival league. Right now, though, we're saying forgiveness is very selective here.
This was not for everyone, the Enterprises program. It was for players who stayed, and it was also players who declined LIV offers, player directors, PAC members, so it's not just players as well. Leaders who carried the tour through the disruption. This was a loyalty settlement, not a performance bonus. So the way you got to look at this is not like something they're going to be giving out to all. This was something to reward loyalty, as Josh was mentioning.
Yeah, and look, anyone who left for LIV was excluded from this nebulous equity and from PGA Tour Enterprises. Let's be clear on that. And players that are coming back now are still going to be excluded for years. Brooks Koepka is going to be excluded, I believe, for 5 years from the equity and the incentive program.
So yeah, okay, so it does continue forward. Players can, I guess, earn their way into it, and it's not all players on the PGA Tour. I think it's only players above a certain level. And that's why Horschel's comment kind of matters here because keeping strength on tour, keeping that product growing, keeping the income coming in does give them a lot of long-term value. Maybe not those that just earn their card and those that are in the bottom echelon of the tour, but it's meaningful for these guys for sure.
So back to Brooks, and one of the comments that he made really stood out to me, and it was about, there are going to be some guys that are pissed about this, and I understand and I accept that those, this is paraphrasing, obviously, I accept that those are relationships that I'm going to have to come back in and I'm going to have to mend. Jordan Spieth the other day said, if he comes back and plays good golf, that's good for everybody. I can't help but wonder if that is Jordan Spieth towing more of the Billy Horschel line of, look, if he comes back, it's going to only increase my value over the long term, i.e. that's good for everybody, even though everybody isn't everybody. Or is it, I didn't have a problem with Brooks, and he just needs to come back, speak with his clubs, and that's going to be that. It's really this: do we move on? Do we not? I think that Brian Rolap would tell you that, okay, well, when it comes to these 4 guys potentially that could earn their way back on here, we need to just move on.
We're also going to have to expand the field after we just did a contraction, guys. We haven't talked about that. So now you're going to bring Brooks back. You're going to have to expand the field. Now it's by 1, but he can't have a sponsorship exemption, and he's going to have to come and play his way into these tournaments. They're not just going to freely give it to him where he automatically gets into them all. But again, I think this is a brilliant strategy by the PGA Tour right now. And as we've already said, this is the biggest swing they've taken at LIV.
Let's take a look at LIV's response to this for a second, and then let's dive into that strategy piece, because that's really interesting.
LIV's response, in that they released the same statement that the PGA Tour made with the same word for word.
I'm going to read this to you guys. I mean, it is
put it on the screen
absolutely
for the
hilarious.
audience.
They have a full statement, 3 paragraphs long. From the outset, LIV Golf has championed an open ecosystem of freedom for all, not just for a limited few. So they're trying to poke at a few things here. One that supports players' rights to compete across various platforms, reinforcing the belief that the growth of the game is best served when the game's best players are empowered to seek the most competitive environments around the world. They're talking about their free agency program. I'm going to skip down here because this is the part that really gets me. As the world's golf league, LIV Golf continues to offer the best professional golfers the most competitive, challenging, and lucrative environment in which to pursue greatness on a global scale. Here's PGA Tour's official statement prior to that. The PGA Tour continues to offer the best professional golfers the most competitive, engaging, and lucrative environment in which to pursue greatness.
Shots fired.
It's quite funny to see how this rolls out. So when we think about strategy here, I mean, this is a war. The golf war continues. We're years into it. They've tried to talk. They've tried to come to the table to merge these things. And now we're in the middle of this free agency piece, which maybe they were waiting for this whole time to try to lure players back over. But what's the downside to what Rolap has put together here? Like, this is a legal precedent. Currently, it has a limited window that expires
February 2nd. So it's quick.
Will they reopen that later? Because, for example, Rahm's contract, it goes like through this season. Like, he's not even going to be up for technically negotiation. So I'm sure he would forego a significant portion of his contract.
Originally, I don't forget what year it was, but it was like a 5-year deal, right? Because this will be his 3rd year on LIV. 2026 will be.
That's right. Cam Smith probably is one of the ones that could jump, considering his contract. He's one of the earlier ones to join.
But if you're Bryson's team, right now you use this as leverage. And Bryson's going to want more control of this league.
So those reports are evidently coming out of Golf Digest. They report on Bryson DeChambeau's status. The whispers suggest he wants out when his LIV contract expires this year. Maybe that's just posturing to negotiate his contract higher with LIV. His asking price is evidently really steep to the LIV guys, which it should be.
Yes, it should be.
Yeah.
And he's demanding more control over LIV's direction. Tour officials recognize their exemption could serve as leverage in his negotiations. The tour wants only 3 LIV players back, supposedly.
Look, I think what it really comes down to over the medium term is capital. We talked a little bit about in PGA Tour Enterprises, they needed to form very quickly an entity separate from the nonprofit PGA Tour that could bring in capital to really just like quickly stem the floodgates for all these player defections to LIV, because LIV was offering guaranteed contracts at the time and shelling out a ton of cash to do it. Now going forward, you've seen the balance kind of tip in favor of the tour now with Brooks coming back, and that's opening a door potentially. I don't know. What if Bryson comes back? That's going to make things, I don't think it happens. We'll see. But that's going to make things a lot more expensive for LIV, and it's going to make things a lot more expensive for them to get even any player, frankly, I think, to sign on and to defect going forward.
In 5 years from now, 3 years from now, so many of these are already going to be non-existent, but there's going to be remnants of what LIV has. I do think that LIV has a great atmosphere about it, that the PGA Tour is just an old school mentality. We've talked about in the first episode that the Waste Management is such a fun tournament to go to from a fan's perspective, but I don't want to go to the John Deere. I just don't care. But the week in, week out, what can we take from LIV that will make the PGA Tour more accessible, more engaging, more fun to watch for the
They've already taken what they wanted to take. I think that you're going to see maybe some adaptations and updates now that Brian Rolap's in place. But I mean, frankly, when you win a LIV golf tournament, you're winning money and that's it. Like you take home a trophy for the very first time or the second time. Any of these PGA Tour events, regardless of whether the sponsorship changes, you've got names on there that date back to the history of this game, sometimes to the entire history of this. I think that the PGA Tour, you can call it older, but you can also call it, history that you want to be a part of. I think all of us at some point in our lives are going to realize we want to leave a mark on this world before we head out, and that's a lot of these guys' way of doing it.
What about behind the scenes, guys? We've never talked about this, but I think one thing LIV does really well to cater towards the players and towards the back end staff that helps make these players so great week in, week out. It costs the players so much money to be able to travel when you're paying on the PGA Tour, and it can be the difference between making money that week or losing money that week. If you don't make the cut, you still have to pay your caddies, you still have to pay for your hotel. And one of the things that LIV does is they shuttle these guys around on BBJs. They make sure to take care of the caddies, so the caddies are now traveling with the players, and they don't have to worry about that capital cost. I think these are small adaptations that maybe Brian, coming from the NFL, will adapt more to be able to make the PGA Tour a place that feels more welcoming for its players. But again, I think there's going to be something moving forward here that we're going to see some adaptations that these the players are going. This is going to be a better league for everybody moving forward.
So let's We got the facts. We looked at the contracts, the statements, the timelines, the incentives. Brooks played the system. He won. Now everyone else is recalculating what loyalty actually buys you because the rules just changed. So they are still looking at LIV. This is not over. The money is still strong over there. It depends on, how hard they're going to fight back and if they're going to keep throwing money at this clear problem that LIV now has because the PGA Tour, has precedent. They have history, they have loyalty, and they've built up a lot of things that mitigate the risks for those that stay on the tour. Let's keep tracking this. Next time we talk about this subject, there's going to be a significant amount more, I'm sure, that comes through the news cycle that we will gather, aggregate, and come back to you guys with. So we'll keep doing what we do, waiting, listening, collecting facts, telling you what actually matters once the noise dies down. If this episode changed the way you see the sport, share it with someone, comment, tell us what you guys think. So we'll see you next time. I'm Brian Harstein.
Patrick Baird.
Josh Lynn. Take care.
Golf Nuts. Bye.